Welcome everyone to this meeting of the South Kingstown Town Council. It is Monday, May 23rd. The time is 7:30. Our first order of business is to pledge to the flag. Please rise and join me. Thank you. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Council President Collins.
Here.
Council Vice President Healy.
Here.
Councilwoman Clow.
Here.
Councilwoman Gledhill.
Here.
Councilman Veely.
Here.
All members present.
Excellent. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of minutes from previous meetings.
I make a motion to approve those items under 4A and B, the work session dated May 9th, 2016, and the regular session dated May 9th, 2016.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously. And brings us to item 5, the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in our agenda packet.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously and brings us to item 6, licenses. 6A is a resolution granting a miscellaneous permit to conduct a portion of a bicycle ride in South Kingstown on Sunday, July 17th, 2016 at 7 a.m. to Life Cycle, Inc. of Barrington, subject to the execution of a hold harmless agreement indemnifying the town, issuance of a certificate of insurance naming the town as an additional insured for the event in the amounts specified by the town as approved by the town's Traffic and Transportation Review Committee, and subject to approval by the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. Proceeds to benefit cancer research and treatment in Rhode Island. Application is by Karen Zions. Is Karen here? Welcome.
Hello.
How are you doing tonight?
Good, thanks. How is everybody?
Good, thank you. Tell us a little bit about Life Cycle and the race.
Well, I assist Life Cycle with the operations of this ride. It's a benefit for cancer. They've been doing it for several years. They've raised about $350,000. This is the 4th year that I'll be involved in helping them. We did it last year and rode through a portion of South Kingstown as well last year. We started and ended at West Kingston Elementary School. This year we're going to start and end at the Farmer's Daughter. And then it's a 75-mile ride and a 25-mile ride.
Excellent. Any questions?
How much is the entry fee for it?
I think they need to raise a certain amount of money to be able to ride, and I think the minimum fee is $250 to raise.
You can register online?
Yes, they do have an online registration. It's Life Cycle, lifecycleinc.org.
Thank you.
Further questions?
I'll make a motion to approve item number 6A.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good luck.
I'm on the next one too, so I may as well just stay.
Yep. Stay right up there. Item B, resolution granting a miscellaneous permit to conduct a portion of the Ocean State Road Race in South Kingstown on Sunday, October 30th, 2016 at 7:30 a.m. To the Road Races and Events, Inc. of Warren, subject to the execution, yada, 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 and proceeds to benefit various local charities. Application by Karen.
That's me again. I own a events management company, Sports Marketing and Events Management, and we produce marathons and half marathons. We did this race last year as well. Last year was the first year. This will be the 2nd year, and we run through a portion of South Kingstown, which is really just Middlebridge Road. We just run down Middlebridge and in and out. So,
Where's this route take you?
it starts at Narragansett Town Beach and runs through Bonnet Shores, and then the marathoners continue on into North Kingstown and then come back Bridgetown, Middlebridge, and then back to the beach. And the half marathoners turn off at Bridgetown and,
Right,
and
I
do
think I
that same
remember
loop.
one from last year, yeah.
Yep.
earmarked the charities yet, or?
Nope, we haven't, it's October, so I'm still working on that. So if you have any suggestions, I'm open to that.
Or maybe it was you, a year or so ago, and some of the volunteers that helped work, were from some of the charities that were being sponsored, and I thought that was really a nice caveat, because they got to get involved, and then
Yeah.
they were years of, you know,
Yep, that's our model on how we recruit volunteers. So we ask volunteers to give us, say if they're doing an aid station, 10 or 12 volunteers to volunteer for a set, usually about 4 to 5 hours or so. And then in exchange for that volunteer we give them a contribution towards their charitable group. So we use a lot of high school teams as well, and so it raises money outside of the school funding for the teams. So they can buy uniforms or take a trip to a meet. We use a lot of track teams, cross country teams, obviously. So it's a nice way to give back to the community, and we try and utilize the communities in which we are running.
Any further
I'll
questions?
make a motion to approve item number 6B.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. Good luck on that one
Thank
as well.
you. Have a nice evening.
6C is a resolution granting a miscellaneous permit to conduct the Wakefield River Festival on Saturday, October 1st, 2016, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Main Street between Robinson Street and Kenyon Avenue, and in the town parking lot to the Wakefield Village Association. This is subject to the execution of a hold harmless agreement indemnifying the town, issuance of a certificate of insurance naming the town as an additional insured for the event in the amount specified by the town as approved by the town's Traffic and Transportation Review Committee, subject to approval by the DOT, proceeds to benefit the Wakefield Village Association. Janet Vertwell is the applicant. Is Janet here?
Hey, Mike, is it okay if I give information on this at all as a volunteer of the group, or should we table it for them coming?
You on the board?
No.
She's a member.
That's fine.
Okay.
That is fine.
Okay. I thought Jan was going to be here tonight. I think there might have been a miscommunication, but they used to do Festival Set downtown, and this year the Wakefield Village Association decided to take that over instead. It's pretty much the same premise. Local artists, we try to get as many local vendors as we can on Main Street selling their goods. I think they're going to have a couple of food vendors in the back parking lot along the river. Pretty much the same thing that they've done with Festival Set in the previous years.
Is Wakefield Village Association funding this?
They are. We've received a couple of sponsorships, but they're throwing the event as their major fundraiser for the year.
So it's going to be a fundraiser.
Well, we're charging the vendors for having we had, I think, 80 vendors last year with Festival Set, and we're hoping to get a similar amount this year. We used to pay a company to come in and do Festival Set for them, and I think the Wakefield Village Association wasn't really making any money off of that, so they decided to take it over and take the benefits from it.
Any other questions that Liz can answer for us?
I'll make a motion to approve agenda item 6C under licenses.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries unanimously. And it brings us to item 7, which is our public hearings tonight. Our first public hearing is a public informational hearing relative to an application from the South Kingstown Land Trust. This is for funding consideration in accordance with the town's open space project funding policy. Said funding will be considered for the potential purchase of development rights to approximately 39 acres of the Whaley Farm located at Assessor's Plat 75-3, Lot 2. Vin is going to tell us more about this.
Good evening. We provided in the council packet a summary memorandum in support of the public informational meeting tonight, and it is a request by the Land Trust to ask for the town to participate in a preservation scenario for the Whaley Farm, which is about 41 1/3 acres, and it's in an R80 zone, and it with quite a bit of frontage on Jerry Brown Farm Road. The property is zoned R80, and it could support approximately 17 lots were it to be subdivided, according to the appraisal. And the proposal in place for the preservation of the premises would place a conservation easement on about just under 40 acres, about 39.86 acres. As part of the consideration, the family plans to by administrative subdivision, deed a small portion of property to a neighboring property owner, Guimond, I guess it's about 6,500 square feet, and that's towards the Route 1 side of the premises. As well, there's a part of the administrative subdivision would provide about 13,770 square feet to the town and a long, thin strip that would assist in regularizing the right-of-way associated with Jerry Brown Farm Road and, allow for the proper maintenance of that verge on the side, which, tends to really overgrown into the travel service. And it may set the stage future-wise for some improvements to the road to address drainage issues in particular and pavement surface issues. The Land Trust has a purchase and sales agreement with the family in the amount of $860,000. They have 4 funding streams in place other than the request for town funding. Those are the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Rhode Island Agricultural Land Preservation Commission, the 1772 Foundation Farmland Fund, and a private fundraising of about $112,500. That totals about $775,000, and the request to the town is for gap funding to complete the resource pool in the amount of $85,000. They are also requesting, in accordance with the town's open space funding policy, another $19,200 for associated expenses, including the property survey, legal fees, appraisal, title policy, etc. We had done a review of the application in accordance with the policy, and it scored very high. Actually, it scored 19 out of a possible 24 points. And some of the things that give it high scores are its scenic value and habitat diversity, and its proximity to other preserved premises, both north, on both sides of the premises. Those being like the Rocky Meadow Farm, 16 acres, Bayfield Farm to the north, the former Browning Farm across Jerry Brown Farm Road, and also common open space associated with the South County Hills development. This is one of the oldest continuous working farms in the town, probably in the state as well, dating back to the 1600s, and also contains a historic cemetery associated with the Hazard and Peckham families. In conclusion of the memo, we had offered a motion for the council's consideration should you be of a mind to authorize municipal funding participation. The request for the town is just under 10%, so it is a request for gap funding, and I know representatives from the Land Trust are here as well to elaborate or answer questions that council may have.
Before we get to them, any questions for Vin from the council? All right, thanks, Vin.
Thanks.
Just
Steve, you
2
wanna-
other comments I'd like to make. One is that the Open Space Reserve Fund, as of June 30 of 2015, contains $668,000 available for use either for debt service purpose or for additional land acquisition or development right acquisition. To date, we've taken in another $268,000, and we expect probably another $20,000 in real estate conveyance fees that will be deposited in this reserve in advance of June 30th. We're expecting to spend, with this acquisition as well as the debt service coverage, about $355,000. So we'll net out at around $600,000 for June 30 of 2016 when we close that fiscal year. One thing that wasn't noted is that the town, Vin and I met with representatives of the family as well as the Land Trust and made it clear that none of the monies from the Open Space Reserve Fund are available to be used for expansion of the town's right-of-way. That is, as a component of us participating in the program, the family is agreeing to provide that land area that Vin mentioned, the 13,000 square feet, to the town without cost. We had done a review of that as far as an appraisal value, which looked at less than $4,000 to $5,000, I think it was, in cost difference. That may be something that they take into consideration for tax purposes in terms of gifting. But there are no open space funds that are being put forward here this evening of that $105,000 in town funding request from the Open Space Reserve Fund that would go for specific costs associated with land acquisition for right-of-way expansion on Jerry Brown Farm Road.
Steve, so the appraisal that you had done for the stretch of land that we're going to have the easement on for drainage, you had it appraised at, what you said, $4,000?
Now, what was appraised was what the difference in value would be for the development rights, the conservation easement, without that strip of land being removed, and with that strip of land being removed, so that there was a net difference of, I think it was around $5,000. The family has the ability to use that in terms of for their taxing purposes, if potentially. But my only point is that it's not coming. We're not paying extra dollars because of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a condition of what our participation would be, but that participation, with or without that land acquisition, would still be the $85,000 in gap funding that was necessary for this project.
I know that we, in previous memo from Mr. Schock, we had, he said we've been really trying to get this easement on that property for many years. Was that something that we ever could have approached either the current owners or previous owners to purchase, or?
There's been different, going back probably 8 to 10 years, there was an appraisal done on that property. It has subsequently changed hands at least, I think, twice at this point since we've looked at that property. There's been a need for many, many years to widen Jerry Brown Farm Road, as well as to get the proper rights to be able to drain because of improper road base that exists right now. With that property conveyance to the town, what we'll be able to do initially will be to be able to widen and take out some of the vegetation without touching the road surface itself. We'll have to then look at what type of reconstruction and drainage improvements will be required, and that'll become probably a project that'll go through the capital improvement program over the next couple of years.
So we've never tried to outright and purchase that before from any of the owners? Were we waiting for, or was there another way to do it?
We've never been able to agree on a reasonable price between the town and whoever the property owner was at a given time.
Okay, so we have tried to buy it from previous owners or current owners, and it didn't work. Okay.
Any other questions at this point? Excellent. Then we'll have some speakers from the public. And Joanne, did you want to come and speak to this first?
Hi, Joanne Riccitelli, the Land Protection Director at the South Kingstown Land Trust. We've been working on this project for a number of years now, and it's changed a little bit in form, but not much in substance, and we're really excited to be able to put this together. We did a fairly public-private fundraising effort and collected donations. Actually got a bit more last week, so the number's a little bigger than it was in the memo. But we'll just ask you for, whenever we decide the closing is, we'll just ask you for whatever the gap amount is and won't exceed $85,000. But we did have donations from 78 people, some quite small, some quite large, and so we were really very pleased with the response and the widespread support of the project. I don't think I have anything in particular to add, but any questions for me at this point?
I had a couple of questions. Thank you so much for talking to me, by the way. A few weeks ago, I went into the Land Trust just to ask more about what they do and how they do it, and it was very informative and super helpful. I was just curious, did you said you did fundraising to come up with the, what was it, $112,000 for the acquisition. Did you consider selling any of the assets that the Land Trust has to make up for the gap before coming to us, or was it all through just private donations?
Well, we don't really have much to sell. I mean, we have a lot of land. Most of it is restricted. On occasion, from time to time, we've sold small pieces of land to neighbors.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that those small lots that you guys have.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because looking at your the forms that you provided me, the tax forms, the 990s, it says that you guys have over $1 million in assets. So I wasn't sure if those were something that you could liquidate to make up for the gap funding. Not that I'm not for the project, I just was curious how you
Yeah, most of that funding is in restricted funds dedicated for legal defense, for stewardship. Yeah, the bulk of that is really restricted funding. And some of them it is funds for particular projects, like our Whedon Farm property, where there's a lot of maintenance involved. There's a specific fund that exists, just to take care of that property. As we protect land, we try to raise money to add to these funds so that we can continue to protect them. Essentially, we're promising to do that forever. So our policy is that we raise funds for every piece of property that we buy, and that we don't use our own money to do it, or at the rate land costs, we wouldn't be doing it very much longer. So it is our policy that we have to raise every penny pretty much for whatever we buy.
Okay, understood. I don't want to monopolize Joanne if somebody else had some questions. I was just curious, I lost my note that I had here. So the public is not going to have access to Whaley Farm, correct?
No.
It'll be one of those properties, and it is sold in perpetuity, meaning it'll never be developed, correct?
Right. It's a pretty, I don't know if you've been out there, I mean, certainly we can, arrange a tour, that kind of thing, but there are big cows out there. I wouldn't want to walk around out there.
It's a beautiful piece of property.
It is.
It really is.
It is.
When we're spending taxpayer dollars to acquire these beautiful pieces of land, it's nice when the public has access to them, which I think we talked about before, and I realize that's not always possible, but essentially almost $100,000 or over $100,000 is just a lot of money. The fees, I had a question on those, if you don't mind. So the $13,000 in the property survey, is that for the whole property? Does everybody pay that, or is that just what the town is bearing? Like all the other, are we doing...
The Land Trust contracted to do that because we need to provide that to all of our funding sources.
Okay.
So we pay for that, and then we're asking for reimbursement on that. And all of the expenses are on a reimbursement basis with invoices. We're not going to get to the 19.2. That's a max, up to, but all of it will be copies of invoices. But yes, the survey's probably the biggest piece of the costs, yes.
If I'm not mistaken, the homestead will stay intact as to where it is. And
Yes.
that's the main entrance going in, and reverse that on up to the outbuilding and to the home. So in terms of restrictions, I want to protect the homeowner's property rights, if you will, because that's the main entrance to Whaley Farm. So
Yes.
being open to the public would really negate their privacy factor. So
Oh, yeah, I understood that.
But it is if the town wants to be a co-holder of the easement, which in previous, we haven't discussed that explicitly, but in previous situations like this, the town has been a co-holder of the easement. So if there were any questions of whether there was a violation of the easement, the town would have the right to use that driveway to get in there and look around and make sure that there weren't any problems. And we would, and the DEM would, and the feds would, and we can all go out there and have a party. No.
Sounds great.
I'm not sure if they're part of Rhodey, are they? Okay, great, yeah, I hadn't talked about where the milk goes, but, yeah, they'll continue with the operations that they have now, you know, and I think their beef cattle is a bigger piece of their business now than the dairy, yeah, they'll keep doing what they're doing, which is the point of doing this, is so that they can do that and still, you know, have some money to retire on, if they ever retire.
I think my question might be for Steve. We abate the taxes for the land trust properties, correct?
We're not using tax dollars, we're using real estate conveyance fees that are collected.
Okay, so, but they don't pay taxes on any of the land that the land trust owns, correct?
We're not going to own it, though.
Right, the development rights, I mean.
Right.
So anything that the land trust owns the development rights on, or the land?
No, the landowners will
Farm
continue.
forest, if you're talking about property taxes, it's under farm forest to begin with. So as farm property, the value that we're getting isn't really going to change. Because the only thing that they're acquiring is the conservation easement. It's still going to be fully owned by the Whaley family and continue to be operated as a farm. So that acreage will continue to be assessed, I think it's at $5,000 an acre.
Okay, so they're still paying taxes on the full property, not just the one that they're allowed now with the...
They'll continue to pay, they'll be paying the market value associated with the 1 acre house lot itself, as well as the house itself. And the rest of the property that's used for farm purposes will be I think it's $5,000 an acre that...
$1,000 an acre.
1,000 on that farmland. So you're talking about another $38,000 worth of land value, which we've had in the past, and it will continue to be there.
Okay, and farms pay a lower tax rate than regular properties, correct?
Absolutely. $1,000 an acre versus that house lot's probably, what would the house lot be, Gene? I would also comment that any of the out-of-pocket expenses that are submitted, they're based on a reimbursement. We check, we receive all of the receipts from them to have full records as to what we have paid. So it's not a case of them suggesting that the price was X number of dollars. We have to see the actual billings for that.
I guess my only reservations are that, I mean, spending $100,000 to acquire this land, which I think it's great that it's not going to be developed, and I wholeheartedly agree that it should be preserved, but spending that much money when the taxpayers aren't going to really directly benefit from it, it's not on a public highway that you drive by and see all the time. Certainly if you drive down Jerry Farm Brown Road, it's gorgeous, but really I just have a hard time spending that amount of money when it's not something that's accessible to the public. And certainly with as much of the assets that you have, although you said much of them are restricted, it just seems strange that we would, I guess maybe I don't understand why we would make up the gap when, if we're not purchasing this stretch of road that we're having access to. I don't understand.
Well, one of the things that the easement document explains is that the state and the feds have all passed laws, statutes that say that preserving land that can produce food is a public benefit, and that's an important public benefit. And some people would argue that's more important than being able to walk on a piece of property. You're also helping to preserve the groundwater that's underneath that land by not developing it, clean air, the cars that aren't on the road because there isn't a subdivision there. There are lots of other benefits, and every piece of property that we protect or that anybody protects will have different values, but they won't have them all. No piece will have them all. This is one where important farm soils are being protected, that food can continue to be grown there. There's a farm stand right there that where they sell, probably not the cows, but, various things that people can buy. And we've had 78 individual people give us some of their money so that we can do this. And that says a lot about how important this farm is to the community and to the town.
Right.
And one of the donors gave $65,000. It was
Wow.
a very important piece for a lot of people.
Now, as a condition of the sale, do the Whaleys have to continue to farm it?
There's no affirmative direction in the easement that the land be farmed, but from a practical point of view, that is what they want to do, and that is the highest and best use of the land once it's restricted, and the soils are good.
Right.
If for some reason they decided they couldn't farm, they would lease it to someone who could, or they would sell it to someone who could. So one way or another, that will be the use of that land.
But it doesn't have to be farmed as a condition of the sale. So essentially, say they were to sell it to somebody, they could just not do anything with it and leave it as open space?
They could. I mean, if someone could buy it and decide they want one horse out in the backyard, that's, if someone wanted to pay that for it, then they could, yeah. It's not what the plan is for this particular piece, though, and this family wants to continue to farm there for quite a while. And they have talked a little bit about succession planning and who's going to work the farm when George isn't able to, get out there. And so they're working on their part of it. And this is part of their plan, is to keep it in the family, reduce the eventual estate tax that it will imply, and go from there.
I know George and Karen well enough. They will never give up their farming rights until the day he passes. They're a farming family.
I think it's important that we do our best to preserve the farms, even if we're acquiring this space and it's not going to have use for everyone in the community. I think it will have benefit to everyone in the community. So I appreciate all the work.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Joanne before we let her go? Thank you.
Thank you.
And at this time, are there other comments from the public?
Good evening, Murray Gates from Kingston. I wasn't planning on talking to this when I came here. I didn't know it was on the agenda, but pleasantly surprised to find that it is. I think it's a great property to be preserved. Went to school with Karen, and I think she's done a wonderful job integrating into that family and continuing that farming property for the last 30-some years. What I did have a question on, however, was something that's comes from one of my experiences working or contributing to the Conservation Commission. I stopped that about 6 years ago. I had to travel and work down in Florida for about a year's time. But when I terminated that assignment and I had to resign, I did send a letter to the town council at the time and really tried to express my frustration with something. And I hope the situation has changed, but I wanted to ask to make sure. On the Conservation Commission, for 5 years sitting on it, I had asked continuously, what do we do to preserve town open space? Because when I signed up for this, the charter for the Conservation Commission was specifically to work with the land trust, to work with the town in being a part of that mechanism that preserves open space. In 5 years, not once, despite probably every month asking the question, how do we get involved? How do we get involved? Continuously, nothing. Always empty promises. So I'm wondering, did my suggestions 5 years ago go unheeded, or has the Conservation Commission, A, been pulled into the process, or perhaps even the charter has been changed?
I'm not aware of the Conservation Commission being involved in any of the land acquisition proposals. I'm sure that they certainly could be, but there was no direct questions asked of the Conservation Commission or a request for a recommendation.
I hate to disappoint you, but I don't know that it's changed any.
I mean, it's in the town people, I would expect, would anticipate seeing that, given that it's in the charter for the committee or the commission. So I think we owe the townspeople a few follow-up actions there. Thank you.
Good evening. Roberta Mulholland, Matunuck Schoolhouse Road. I haven't been here for a few years on this open space and development rights funding by the taxpayers of South Kingstown. The money always seems to go to the land trust. What I used to come and ask the town council is to follow up on everybody's promise when you're running. You're going to do something to protect the farmers. You're going to do something for the farmers, the farm owners, the people who actually do the work. You never do. You give money to the land trust. It's easy for them to come in and say, this farm, we're going to lose it. Big sign on the highway, save the farm. You know how you can save some farms? Give some tax relief to the farmers. Other towns do it. Other towns exempt farmland from taxation. They tax the house, the area around the house, what Steve was talking about, and they exempt the rest of the land. Farming isn't a big money-making endeavor. That's what farmers need. Farmers shouldn't be forced to have to sell the development rights. I looked at the tax bill for the South Kingstown Land Trust. I went to their website. They own 2,600 acres of property in this town. I don't know if that makes them the largest landowner, but they're a pretty big one. We have a tax printout, and I'm not sure that this is right, but it looks like the land that they own, the taxpayers of this town already subsidize by exempting them from real estate taxes to the tune of $330,000 a year. That's money. $330,000 a year. Why aren't you subsidizing the actual farmers and the other open space landowners who pay their taxes? Because it's easier to give money to the land trust because they know how the grants work. Well, we've all heard about the grants program in Rhode Island. And I think for every grant problem we have in the General Assembly, we have 39 cities and towns where you people are handing out grants. I don't know that there's an application process or criteria for it. I know we have a policy for grading properties and when we're going to buy them or contribute to the development rights. It's all very subjective. Is it a scenic piece of property? This farm is scenic to the people who live down in the developments on Jerry Brown Farm Road. They go by it every day. Is it scenic to someone who lives in Peacedale that's going to subsidize this? Maybe not. Maybe they don't even know where it is. So where's the actual follow-up on, I'm concerned about the farmers? Where is it? You're running for office and you tell us that, but you do nothing. You give taxpayers money to the land trust. 2,600 pieces of property? 2,600 acres? 150 pieces of property? Who are they? Does anybody ever look at their books? Does this town ever require audited financials of the land trust? Again, Steve, I don't know the answer to that. I'm just throwing it out there.
No, we do not.
No. And that's the council's job, to ask for that. Why are we writing checks? Why are we paying for their legal fees? Why are we paying for their legal fees? You pay for anybody else's legal fees? We should pay for the town's legal fees. Why are the taxpayers paying for it? Why are we paying for the survey? When parties to a transaction engage in that transaction, they decide this up front. They don't decide at the very end, after the deal is done and they've made their deal, to come here, we're just going to get the rest of the money from the taxpayers of the town. That's another $100,000 this year. I don't know what the 2016 taxes are going to be, but it looks like $330,000 last year, taxpayer money had to make up what the land trust didn't pay. I'm passionate about this. I represent a lot of farmers. I'm married to a farmer. I love the parts of South Kingstown that are farms. but you haven't done anything except hand out money to this organization that has plenty of money. So what? 78 people gave money. Get another 78 people to give money. How dedicated are they? Why do the people in Peacedale have to subsidize it? It says nothing against the Whaleys. I understand what it's like to farm. I understand how hard it is to make a living. I understand what the quarterly tax payments are. And I understand how hard all the people in this town who do farm feel about that quarterly tax payment. But it's up to you to look at the rest of the taxpayers. That's your job. I'm sorry, that's your job. Promise us everything when you're running and give away the taxpayers' money without any follow-up. Have you decided what your criteria is? Are you going to require an audited financial from this organization? They must have some money. They've got a job ad for a new executive director. They have money. Restricted funds? Well, where does it say that? Do we have any financial documents that say that? I don't know. But I know it's time that you stop giving away the taxpayers' money, considering the people who are on, you know what, have any of you ever been on a tax sale list? People come to me, they're on the tax sale list. You're giving away their money for something they're never going to appreciate, really. It's wonderful to say, it's beautiful in the trees and the air and no more cars down Jerry Brown Farm Road. And then let's get to Jerry Brown Farm Road. Because that piece of property has been available for a long time. I know because at one time I owned part of it. Nobody came and offered to buy that property. You could have bought the whole strip, widened the road, had your drainage easement. Instead, you're going to pay this way for, I'm not sure reading the memo, are you going to own part of the land, a little strip? You're not going to solve your problem. That was available. It was available, and you could have gotten it for less than this. And I also finally want to say, I didn't get here early, so I don't know if this has been discussed, but I'm surprised to see Abel Collins sitting up there voting on this, because his father is employed by the Land Trust. And while that may technically not be an ethics violation under the state law, it certainly does raise the appearance of an impropriety that you would be voting to give money to the organization that employs your father. I appreciate some of the questions that were asked. I find the presentation to be so lacking when someone's coming up here and asking for $100,000. I mean, that is lacking. And I would hope that you represent all the taxpayers in this town, all of them, and think about, if you're giving money away, what are you requiring? Or do you just give it away and wait till the next request? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments from the public at this time? Joanne, do you want to respond to any of those points?
There's a lot there. I think that my request for funding was in a two-part application process with lots of documentation, some of which been discussed, and I was really not making the full pitch here because I had done that all in paperwork and it had been processed in more just answering questions. The town council many years ago, when the Young Land Trust was formed, decided that it should be exempt from property taxes, or else there wouldn't be a land trust, because we couldn't afford to be paying taxes on every piece of property we protected. Of the 26, now it's 2,700 acres we protect, about half of that has been given to us by landowners who want to see their land preserved. And most of the acquisitions that we've done, I think there's probably, I don't know, maybe 10 that we've come to the town to ask for money. And we're not asking the town as all the taxpayers, we're asking specifically to use the open space bond fund that has been repeatedly passed by a majority of the voters who have set aside money specifically to do these things. And this is the mechanism by which these things get done. A willing landowner, someone who wants to sell their development rights or wants to sell their land, comes to us because we are the local land trust. And they tell us what they need, and we try to make it work. We apply to various grants. We, do what we need to do. When there's a donation, none of you see any of us on that. Or when we fund a purchase with money that has not required town funds, you don't see us then either. We only come when we don't have enough from the other sources that we are, I must say, very good at mining. There are lots of grants out there. There are lots of agencies, private, public, federal, state. We go to all of those, and the town is always our last resort. We want to use your money last because we want there to be more money here for when we don't have other sources of funds. So we're very good at finding money at all the other places. But when we don't have enough, and coming here to ask for less than 10% of the purchase price, I think is a pretty good deal. There's a lot of leveraging going on there. But the money that we're asking for is not tax money from people. We're asking for money that has been previously set aside by the vast majority of the voters who have repeatedly put aside 1, 2, however many millions in the various bonds that have been passed over the years. And it's that very restricted, targeted funds that we're asking for a piece of. And this particular farm, I can't really think of a better use of those funds.
That's fine.
Liz came by the office, asked for our financials. I gave them to her. If you want me to send you email or hard copies, more than happy to do that. They're publicly available. They're always publicly available.
These are the 990s, right?
990,
not
right.
the
We also
audited
have financial statements too. We can, we're a 501c3. All of that stuff is available. Just ask. We'll send it over. You can even find it online.
Steve, I have a question. Give me you've given it to us before, the percentage of property in our town that's now open space?
I don't have that right with me, but it's probably in the $50 million worth.
Around 30%?
Yeah.
Of the available
It's approximately
land. So my question to you, Joanne, is there a goal? Does the Land Trust have a goal and what that number should be?
We don't have a goal in terms of the number. Our goal is more that if a landowner has a piece of land that is, verifiably valuable for water resources, farmland, whatever, then we want to work with that landowner if they want to try to protect their land. That's really what it is we're trying to do. I mean, we have done analyses. We've worked with numbers that the town has developed on build-out analysis. The broader question is, how big do we want this town to be? I mean, we're at however many thousand people we are, 28, 30, somewhere in there. What does build-out look like? Is it 40,000 people? And how many, what percentage increase are we looking at if all the available land, because that's what it really comes down to, is if all of the available developable land were developed, what would your town look like? And that's what the build-out analysis is, and the last one I remember was from a couple of years ago. And when I look at those numbers, over the years they've gotten less scary, but they're still kind of scary. It used to be we could have grown by another 50% in population back when we started doing this, and there aren't that many ways to affect your ultimate build-out, and one of them is to protect land so that it doesn't get developed.
So we're approaching it just from a different way. I get that.
Yeah, but our priority is really to work with landowners that come to us who have land that objectively through our various databases we look through, is land that is worthy of protection, and then if we can get grant money, then that kind of reaffirms that it's worthy of protection.
I think our town has been very generous, and I think it's proven out in that we're at 30%, which I think is a very substantial number. But I just was curious if the Land Trust had...
There's no magic number there, but we want to be able to work with landowners when they come to us is really what it comes down to.
Point about access to the public for parcel, 41 acres, 39 point something, if you will. And then there's a lot of adjacent properties around the Whaley Farm and also down in the Matunic area. How many of those properties are open to the public?
Well, the ones immediately adjacent are other farms, so those are not open to the public because they're active farms. If you get into... Right. The farm that we own outright, the Whedon Farm on Matunic Beach Road, we do have a walking trail around the perimeter of that, which, because we have our facility right there, people can park and walk around the land itself. The farmland is leased to the neighbor, but there is a walking trail around that property. I think we maintain 8 different trail properties at the moment, which is a lot for an organization with, 5 part-time people. Most of them are not. There's only 8, I think, trails that are open to the public, and we have our hands full with keeping those properly used.
Joanne, the Land Trust barn, is that where you're talking about? There's a walking trail around it?
Uh-huh.
So can any member of the public rent that barn out?
No. The facility itself, we rent to other nonprofit groups for nonprofit group related things.
Okay.
But anybody can park in the parking lot, and there are little trail guides. There's a kiosk there, and they're right there, and it's sort of a geology trail. There's a lot of interesting rocks in the walls around the perimeter, and so it points out different things. But anybody can go and take a walk around there, and that's all on our website if people wanted to go for hikes. We spell all those out.
Because you get rental income on the barn, is there a payment in lieu of taxes for that property?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, good.
There is a payment in lieu of taxes agreement between the town council and the land trust, which is affirmed on a yearly basis. For the property holdings at Whedon Farm, it is 50% of what the value would be. So we would be charging them 50% of what full real estate values would be based on past agreements that have been in place for many years.
Thank you.
Just a comment. The question that Joe asks, and I think that Roberta is addressing, from a municipal staff perspective, we're addressing and bringing forward recommendations to the council based on the council's adopted open space policy funding policy for projects. That was first created back in 1999 and it's been amended several times since then. I think the last amendment was in 2005. Certainly, if the council wanted to review the policy itself and whether the 30% factor becomes an issue, this goes back to my budget message to you this year in terms of looking at what the values are associated with open space and farm forest properties, what the tax implications are associated with it, as well as the out-of-pocket expenses that are also addressed in that policy statement. So, I mean, if the council wants to go through that, I think what we would need to do is to have a full discussion on that policy and whether the policy still fits what the community needs would be in terms of future funding. Because, as I said in the development of the 16-17 budget, based on the funding availability that's there, it's really a question on how much additional funding should be set aside for that, or whether we should be retiring existing debt associated with open space facilities. Certainly we can evaluate or review the financials from the land trust, but the land trust isn't the only one that has property that's either in pilot agreement, and if you were going to look at their pilot, it should be all of the pilots that would be looked at. But there also, we talked about in the budget again, the fact that we have most of the open space property has a 15-year penalty, declining penalty, and probably 90% of all the property that's held in open space at this point is without penalty to come back onto full tax value. The difference with where conservation easements are taken is those are in perpetuity. So you're paying for those. I think that you need to look at a conservation easement not as an ownership, but rather as a restriction on what can be done with the property. That property, the day after those development rights are acquired, is still zoned R80. However, it can no longer be used for an R80 purpose. It's limited to, just as if you owned a house lot and a building on that house lot, if you wanted to let that house lot go and not be used in perpetuity, you could. If there was a house on it, you could let it fall apart. Whether that would be a realistic use of the property is something that you'd have to look at. But if this is something that we want to integrate into the council's goals and objectives in terms of those evaluations, it can be done. But understand, it's a much broader look that's necessary than how the specific policy deals with a land trust, because we've also provided dollars from open space acquisitions and conservation purchases to the other land trust in the community. And a good deal of the property that we've used open space money for of Route 1 and Saugatucket Road. The town took full possession of that. Obviously, as soon as they take possession, they've taken it off of the tax roll. But based on the council's directives in terms of its policy development, its objective was to try to reduce what the build-out potential would be for the community to keep the sense of place that had been identified in the comprehensive plan. So there's a number of factors. I certainly think that many of the things that Roberta says are important things that need to be reviewed periodically, and they can be done. But I think one of the core documents would be the policy statement. Certainly, tangential to that could be what the financials are with the land trust, or whether or not the pilot agreement is appropriate at this point, or whether it needs to be changed up or down. But each of those things would be something that would be looked at the same time you looked at a welcome house, same time you looked at the campgrounds that now is Camp Jury, all of those different ones that we deal with on a yearly basis. So I think there's a lot of good information that's coming out tonight, but in accordance with existing policy, this request for the $85,000 isn't in accord with your existing policy.
I just have two more quick things. I did talk to Steve when this first came to our attention about the audited financials of the land trust, not because I suspected any wrongdoing, just because I thought it was prudent considering how much money we were spending and how much money we've spent over the years with them. So I would love in the future to see the council consider a policy where if there's a certain dollar amount in which we give to a nonprofit, we do have access to their audited financials, and not just their 990s, which are always available for a 501c3. But I think that that's something I'd love to discuss in the future and see if we can all agree on something. And I also was curious, Roberta mentioned about how other communities have abated the taxes for other farms, and I'd love to get some more information and see maybe some examples of policy in the other communities, just for my own reference to see what surrounding communities are doing.
We can do that. There are some communities that exempted in total. At this point, it's tokenism to have on the farm $1,000 an acre. There's 38 acres at $15.09, what the tax rate will generate about $585.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the total tax bill for the year. If you broke it out into quarterlies, you're talking about the $150 a quarter.
I guess I'm talking about the farms that haven't sold their development rights, that just own their properties outright, what their policies are. It is.
If they're in the farm forest.
Beyond the homestead.
Okay.
Excess acreage.
Okay.
Outside the 2 acres.
There may be some that have exempted them altogether. But
Just for my own reference, I'd love to see some examples.
I do think getting financials of people that come to ask for money is a good idea. I had talked to Steve about that before myself, and getting a treasurer's report, getting financials of these. We have various groups that come, and I appreciate, as Roberta said, the people in Peacedale might not benefit from this, but yet there's other things that we're funding in Peacedale or Wakefield that might not have benefit to those in West Kingston or Green Hills. So we do certainly have to balance what we fund. But I think it would be something worth noting for us to maybe sit down and write some new criteria before you come and ask for money.
That would be a whole nother discussion. Mike, the fact that my father works at the Land Trust, is there any...
So I'll start by saying only the Ethics Commission can give you the absolute legal advice, and solicitor's opinion is non-binding. Having said that, the money is actually going for the acquisition of development rights, so this money's not going to pay your father's salary, or I don't even know if he collects anything. So
I think that's all right, thank you. Any further comments from the public or from the council?
I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I just wanted to talk to you about the financials of a nonprofit. Audited financials cost about $10,000. So most small nonprofits don't have the ability to do that on an annual basis or even every 5 years. So what they do is they use consolidated financial statements. Typically they use an accountant. And all of that, most small nonprofits don't have enough people to actually do the accounting, so somebody else does it for them. So I would just caution that you, in your wording when you're examining financials, if you want to include any small nonprofits, that you consider that and use consolidated financials instead.
Did the speaker just identify yourself?
I'm sorry, my name is Karina Burston. I live in Wakefield. Thank you.
Roberta Mulholland again. Question on the bonds. Do the bonds, are they written to allow these legal fees, survey fees?
I don't think that there's any prohibition in them. I certainly haven't looked specifically for that purpose. The bonds are for the use for acquisition on open space or purposes. I'd have to look at the exact charge of each of those, Roberta, to answer your question directly.
I think that we should know that before we reimburse anybody for their legal fees, and the title policy. Is the town getting a title policy?
No, I'm saying to you, the policy does permit it. I have not specifically looked at the bond language itself. I would doubt that the bond language would be drawn that tightly. I think it would just simply say that for the purposes of securing those types of properties.
I think in the past our bonds did prohibit the payment of those kinds of fees, but they could have changed. And the policy itself, ineligible property acquisitions shall include land intended for active recreation, transportation. So to the extent that money's going, and I heard you describe we're going to putting in this money for the development rights, and we're just getting this easement and a piece of property that we're going to use for the road. In fact, you're paying for it.
No, we're not. When I sat down with the property owner and the land trust, I indicated that we felt that if we were going to participate in the $85,000, that we were not going to pay for any additional fees as a outright expense to acquire that strip of land, and that's how that was put together. There was no change.
Okay. So none of the bond money's going for the road.
Again, let's go back to, it's not bond money that we're talking about here. We're taking the money that's been generated through real estate conveyance taxes that the council has directed to go into a capital reserve fund for land acquisition.
Okay.
There's bond money that exists. When we bought the Noyds Farm, we used bond money for that. When we bought the Saugatucket Road property, we used bond money for that. But this specific $85,000 isn't coming out of bond money. It would come out of those funds that were generated. This year alone, we've generated about $260,000 in real estate conveyance proceeds that have gone into that reserve fund.
But the policy says you can't use it for transportation. So what you're saying is there's an agreement somewhere that is very clear that this money is not going for this parcel, and there's an administrative subdivision, 2 of them, as part of this deal.
That's correct. I made it clear at that point that because at that point the family was interested in selling the property to the town, and I said, I won't acquire it. It should be a component of the overall sale, and the negotiated price for the $860 had already been established.
I'm sorry, I missed that. They wanted to sell it to you, but you said no.
I said I would not purchase the property, and that it should be conveyed to the town if in fact the development rights were going to be purchased. And the price of the development rights had already been established.
Okay. Second question on that barn that you were describing how the taxes work on that. What are the taxes that are paid on the barn?
Based on 50% of the assessment value of the property.
Is that the total assessment of the property? All of the farmland and the fields?
The parcel itself that holds the barn, I believe it's just that acreage.
Do we know how much that is?
Offhand, I don't.
No, I mean the actual tax.
I would have to, I can give you the information tomorrow. I can send it to you.
I think this is really not pertinent to the question at hand, so.
It is pertinent, and I do want to say that people are allowed to ask questions, and we are able to look at a little more than a memo, and a public hearing should actually have a little more explanation of what you're doing.
He can get you the information tomorrow. She can get it for you probably before then.
I assume from what Mike said, you're going to vote, even though your father works for them, and some of this money is going into their checking account to pay their bills. I think that is not appropriate.
This money is going to the farmers that you want to protect. Do I hear any other comments from the public at this point? All right. Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
Make a motion that we close the public hearing.
So moved. Any further comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item number 7A. Gotta get my glasses on. Before I do, I would like to say I certainly did hear everything that was said. I do think it's important that we understand this money was voted on. When people vote to give money to open space, this is what it's for. If we need to review the policy and how we go about this, that's something that we should certainly look into. All right.
Rachel, if I can just interrupt, there is a draft motion that's been provided in the memo.
Yep.
If you have that, could you use that?
That's
Thank you.
Okay. The draft motion for consideration. If, at the conclusion of the public informational meeting, the town council is of the mind to authorize municipal funding participation in this preservation scenario, the following motion is offered. The motion is, the town council hereby approves an application from South Kingston Land Trust in accordance with South Kingstown's open space project funding policy concerning the Whaley Farm. Said funding is granted in the amount not to exceed $85,000 towards the purchase of development rights to 39-plus acres associated with the farm premises located at Assessor's Plat 75-2, Lot 3. The council also authorizes funding in the amount not to exceed $19,200 for allowable reimbursement costs. Said approval is contingent upon the conveyance dedication of 13,771 square feet, 0.32 acres from Whaley to the town of South Kingstown as depicted in the plan entitled Administrative Subdivision Plan prepared for South Kingstown Land Trust Assessor's Plat 75-2, lots 1 and 3, situated in the town of South Kingstown, RI. Planned by Dowdell Engineering Incorporated. Approval of this application is further conditional upon a grant by Whaley of the general right to drain easement to the town in a form accessible to South Kingstown Town Solicitor and Director of Public Services. It is hoped that this memorandum is useful in the consideration of the public informational meeting. If questions exist or clarifications are required, please advise. And if we could just add, Meg, you wanted to add contingent upon,
I would like to see that, I would
Contingent
entertain a motion
upon-
contingent upon seeing financial, if that could be added to the motion. Or maybe that would be a second motion, I'm not quite sure.
okay.
It's more, because of seeing the financials seem to be a little broader
Right.
topic, and it's not really even on tonight's agenda either. Yeah, because I think, as Steve said, in terms of, you might want to make that a broad policy.
Yes,
With, not that you're going to ask every nonprofit to go and get an audited financial statement, but it may be, given this climate, that it makes sense for the council to ask for financials on any organization that you decide to contribute to. And maybe we should make that part of the next agenda.
Yep.
Do I hear a second?
second.
All right, so moved. Further discussion?
Just want to say I appreciate all the information that Vin Murray had gathered and put on this topic. I really appreciate Joanne being so receptive to my questions and being available down at the office whenever I have a question. I do have some reservations, so I will be voting no tonight, but I do appreciate the acquisition of this farm. I think that the broader picture and what some of the discussions we had are going to lead to some really productive policies later, and I'm looking forward to discussing those.
Other comments? Great. Well, I think before I vote, I will be voting in favor of this. Nothing to do with my dad, Roberta. But this is an extremely valuable piece of property for preservation purposes. I've been working in the conservation world myself for some time, and I think it's going to be a great asset to the town of South Kingstown. And I want to thank the Land Trust for putting this deal together, the Whaleys for, working with the Land Trust, and I think it's a benefit for the town because we'll finally be able to fix up Jerry Brown Farm Road as we've been desiring to do for some years. So, seems to be a win on a lot of counts, and so thank you for all the work that went into it. Any further comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Nay?
And by a vote of 4-1, that motion carries. Item 7B is a public hearing relative to proposed amendments to the town code, Chapter 18.5, the tree ordinance, as shown on Exhibit 1 attached to your agenda. Who was going to present on this one?
Let me start out. The ordinance which has been presented as Exhibit 1 on your agenda tonight is presented in a manner to document with underlining any of the new language that's proposed, as well as strike through for any of the language that is to be removed from the existing ordinance. The substantial changes that are occurring here tonight really are limited to Section 18.5-36, restitution for replaced trees. But and what I'd like to do is to walk through the first section. Is again language additions that have been added to provide better explanation as to what this ordinance is addressing and the importance of trees and what trees are covered by the ordinance. The purpose again, deals with the protected trees. New definitions are provided, and that all work that's performed on town trees will meet certain standards. The definition section, which is on page 2 of the exhibit, certainly I can identify any of those, or if there's any questions from council on any of the new definitions that are being provided. I think one of the more important definitions is the diameter of breast height at the 4.5 feet, to be able to measure the trees so that there's an objective standard in place when we're looking at what the value of the tree is or what the replacement requirements will be for the tree. On page 3, we have redefined, as far as the appointment qualifications, that the tree warden must be a licensed arborist. Obviously, that's always been the case, but there's a difference between someone who's passed the exam and the person who is actually licensed. It's cleaning up of the language itself. The duties of the tree warden have not changed. They are really stated within the state statutes under Title 214. We have added a new paragraph F, which says that the warden will attend meetings of the tree board when the tree board is requested to provide a advisory opinion. Mr. Wallace does attend tree board meetings now, but there was nothing directive within the language of the ordinance that specified that he would be there to be able to answer questions before they were providing an advisory opinion. On the following page on the exhibit, when this ordinance was initially passed, there was a proposal for a tree management plan to be developed within 5 years of inception of the ordinance. Obviously, that's come and passed. That ordinance provision is being stricken. And also, we're providing the enabling ability within the ordinance for the tree board to be able to provide advisory opinions to other boards as well as to the town council if requested. The authority for the tree board itself really is fashioned as the current ordinance is in place, just with changes of the language. One of the reasons we've gone from right-of-way, on the public right-of-way to and other protected trees is to provide flexibility if, let's say, Parks and Recreation or the school department were to ask the warden, tree warden, to be responsible for or providing opinions as to the health and welfare of the trees within their holdings. At this point, the tree warden under state statute deals specifically with trees within the town's public right-of-way. He can be requested to deal with the Parks and Recreation, and he can be requested with the schools. At this point, that is not done because we do have arborists available within the Public Grounds Division, and the school department will consult on occasion with Mr. Wallace. The membership hasn't changed as far as it being a dual membership with the Conservation Commission and the tree board itself. The next section that deals with protections of the trees within the right-of-ways, again, we're dealing with the introduction of how we would protect those trees. This is a little bit different, and it'll start to address within the subdivision regulations itself. There are 2 documents that have been prepared that are ancillary to the ordinance, which would assist in management of trees and to provide better definition for the subdivisions. On the next page, we deal with the removal and pruning of trees. This is a new section that's being added, and it talks about the necessity for the posting of trees before they are removed if they are of a non-public safety nature. However, the tree warden has the responsibility, if there's an immediate public hazard that's been defined with a tree, to be able to remove it without the posting and the 5-day notice, as well as that appeal period of within 6 days of the posting. So that's new language, but really comes out of the statute, state statute provisions. On the next page, we deal with the enforcement. And with the enforcement itself, we're removing the existing compensation section and replacing it with restitution for the replacing trees. And this is a means of us being able to establish a monetary restitution amount of up to $2,500 on trees removed. We will be defining the size of the tree, and there will be a scale that will be provided within the tree replacement policy that will establish how many trees need to be replaced for the size of a tree that's removed. We will establish the value of those trees based on the town going out to bid on a yearly basis for the cost of planting of a certain sized tree and the maintenance of that tree for a 2-year period. And we will be able to provide fines up to $2,500 for the improper removal or without a permit removal of a tree. The remainder of the ordinance is really just a change of some of the language that existed in the existing ordinance. I can provide detail. At this point, we have 7 notices of violation under the existing ordinance, where the fees that would be required as penalties are substantial and higher than what we feel should be required based on the nature of the complaints and the violations that occurred. What we would do is, with adoption of this new section on restitution for replacement trees, we would retroactively reassign what the values were for those notice of violations and reduce the fees to be equal to what they would be on a prospective basis. We think that this provides the tree warden with an opportunity to better enforce proper tree management within the right-of-way itself. It also provides continuing support with the tree board to be able to review and provide advisory opinions to the tree warden on tree permits of a non-public safety nature. I'd be glad to address any questions or comments that council may have or the public may have on the drafting of the reworked ordinance.
I appreciate all the work that went into this. It was amazing what the fines would be, and I think this new ordinance makes much more sense. So thank you.
Yeah, I would mention that this drafting has been involved with the Public Services Director, the Tree Warden, the Planning Director, the Senior Planner, and the Conservation Commission. I did provide council with memorandums as far as all of the recommendations that had come from the Conservation Commission and noted the ones that we accepted and incorporated into the ordinance redraft, as well as those that the either legal counsel or staff did not feel was appropriate. The major change that the Conservation Commission was looking for was to expand its duties and responsibilities within the ordinance. In so doing that, it really would address duties and responsibilities that statutorily are set for the tree warden, for he or she to be able to manage that position as an appointed official. So on each of those, I think there were 5 different sections that looked at broadening the authority of the tree board. Staff had recommended against those type of changes occurring. 4 of them were broadening of responsibility, and 1 was legal counsel indicating that it would be a defect in the ordinance if it was redrafted in the manner requested.
Steve, does the burden fall onto the landowners to report the violations that they might see, or do we do like an audit periodically of the trees under our care to make sure that there is nobody in violation?
It's a combination. For the most part, what we see is if a tree is being removed on the right-of-way without a proper permit, we're hearing it from the neighborhood itself, or we're hearing about it in terms of the Public Works Department finding it at a later time. If an area's been stubbed, certainly they're going to investigate how that tree was removed. We also work with the arborists that are licensed arborists that are working in the community, and they certainly are aware that no work can be done in the right-of-way without a permit in place. A great deal of work that's done within the right-of-way is done by National Grid on the town's behalf in coordination with the tree warden. Many times we can get a great deal of work done that is important to them for line purposes, but also deals with removal of a lot of dead limbs. Normally not the removal of full trees, but rather that which would be hanging over the road that could be dangerous during snow or high wind conditions.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? All right. Then at this time, we'd open it up to comments from the public. Is there anyone here to speak on the tree ordinance update, tree board ordinance?
Excuse me. Bill Rosen, Kingston. I looked through this policy and I was just curious about one thing. The policy is meant to protect trees that have monetary value, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Bill, can you repeat that for me?
The policy is meant to protect trees that have monetary value. Is that correct? That are on public land?
On any public right-of-way.
Right.
And it's not so much the monetary value, but really the value of the tree itself. If no one has the right to remove any tree that's on public property without the public giving approval for that.
And what about a tree that doesn't have any monetary value, such as the one that lives on the easement between my property and my next-door neighbor? It's a locust tree, and it's really a nuisance. And many, many years ago, I asked Bill Wallace to take a look at it, and he just looked at it, turned around and walked away.
I think that what we will find with any arborist that is appointed as a tree warden is that if the tree is on a right-of-way and it is a healthy tree, that he or she is not going to look for the removal unless there's a public safety purpose associated with that removal.
Well, this particular tree happens to have grown through a guide wire to an electrical line.
If that's the case, then...
If a hurricane comes down, that pole is coming down.
Well, Professor, I think that we're here to talk about the ordinance, not your tree. But what I can say to you is I can have...
Well, I'm mainly wondering if I applied to have a permit to remove it.
If you apply, then we're going to have Mr. Wallace inspect it again, and with Mr. Schock, determine whether or not it should be removed. If it's of a non-public safety nature, the permit will most likely be sent to the tree board for its review.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know, if I applied.
But if Mr. Wallace decides that he's going to deny based on the health of the tree, it's that permit's not going to go anywhere.
Okay, I understand.
Any other?
My name's Dave Middleton. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
I wasn't planning on speaking or saying anything tonight. I was just coming to watch the proceedings. I found myself to be have run afoul of the town of South Kingston with regard to tree removal. And I have since that occurred a couple of weeks ago, I've come up to speed on it. I have a couple of questions. I didn't know anything about this tree ordinance, and the tree that I cut down is on my property that I pay taxes on. So a lot of people in this town have trees that they think belong to them, but apparently they don't. And I asked about 8 people if they knew anything about this, and only one person did. It was a general contractor who has run afoul of the town of South Kingston for taking down a tree. So my first question is, what efforts have been made to publicize this $2,500 penalty? And I asked that question, and I found that there's a 8.5 by 11 picture of a tree in the building officials' offices. Don't cut down trees. And I think under the circumstances, that's not sufficient. I've had no idea. I got a lot of trees now that are in this right of way, and I had no idea, and nobody I know except for that contractor had any idea. So, I mean, if you're driving a car and there's a speed limit, it tells you can't speed, and people don't do it. At least not when there's a cop behind them. But nobody knows about this, and a $2,500 penalty is a serious whack. Quite honestly, it feels like a gotcha. You know, it's like this little, oh good, you know, that's the way it feels. So what efforts have been made to publicize this $2,500 gotcha? Does anybody know? Besides that 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper on the building official's wall?
Let me answer it a different way. The $2,500 is a maximum amount that could be levied for a tree removal. The estimated value on a tree today, if it were removed and there was a penalty imposed, is $600. If someone is not aware that they're taking down a tree that's on a public right-of-way, I would assume that, if they're not aware of it, I'm not sure how we can make them aware of it, other than the fact that if they're not sure it's on their property, they shouldn't be touching it without, contacting the town. I think, there's an awful lot of ordinances that come down to practical common sense. If you don't own the property, you don't have the right to remove a tree on it.
I had my property surveyed, and I owned.
Well, if that tree is on your property, then you shouldn't be paying any penalty at all. Because you have the right to do whatever you want on your property. If the tree isn't on the public right-of-way, then you wouldn't be involved with it.
Okay, well, that leads me to my next question. In trying to come up to speed on the ordinance, where in the ordinance is the geometry of the public right-of-way specified? I heard it by word of mouth that it's 27 feet from the center line of the middle of the road.
No, it's not. Every right-of-way may be different, particularly with a town as old as South Kingstown. We have some right-of-ways that may be 24 feet. We have others that may be 45 feet. And in some cases, the road isn't in the center of the right-of-way, but maybe off to the side. In fact, in some places, the road may actually be on private property. So every single right-of-way is going to have to be researched as far as where the property line is. When you buy your property, if you had a survey that was completed on that property and there were bounds put in, I would assume that those bounds would properly delineate how much distance there is from the drive surface itself to the corner of your property.
Mm-hmm.
If the tree were between the street and where those bounds were, then that would be part of the public right-of-way.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't, in many cases, we're going to have a 40-foot right-of-way, and people say, well, gee, I own from 20 feet from the center of the road. Well, in many cases, a lot of the old roads were laid out, but they followed the path of least resistance. So if in fact the developer said this is where the right-of-way is, if the road was already laid out in advance of that, that's where that road would stay. So you may have 30 feet on one side and 1 foot on the other with the road hugging that one corner. So it's got to be a review on each parcel individually. Okay,
but to understand, that's not specified by the town anywhere?
It can't be, because every right-of-way, when it was acquired, I mean, the town took over town roads going back, into the early 1800s.
Yep.
And at that time, some of the roads were, 30 feet, and again, some may have been 45 feet. And again, it's not the road, the macadam itself. It's how much of that property is
I
publicly
think I
owned.
own part of the road. The pin is right in the road.
I know, there's an awful lot of people that say that, I cut the grass on your right-of-way, so I think it's my grass, and
The surveyor's mark is right on the road
if
pavement.
that's the case, then you don't have a problem.
Okay, but,
I'm
so it's
hopeful
incumbent
that for
upon
your
me,
sake-
it's incumbent upon me then to prove that I,
Yeah, what I would ask you to do is to contact John Schock, and John can send somebody out to look at your issue, and we can see if we can straighten it.
okay, I will do that.
Mr. Middleton, just
Yes,
so you know, during our work session, we discussed that exact situation. How would people know if their trees were in the right-of-way? I used the example of my own property. When I bought it, I didn't realize that the tree that was in front of my house was in the town right-of-way until there was a notice on it that it was coming down. I was glad to see it go down because it was diseased, but I think that's a fair point. It is difficult to distinguish where the town right-of-way is, especially if you're not in a very public area where it's obvious. So I think that there is merit to that, and that's something to think about, if there's an easier way we can make that clear to people, because it's not black and white. It's certainly very vague. So I sympathize with your confusion.
As I said, right now, we've got 7 notices of violation that are in place. And as I say, we've only had an average of about 5 permits each year over the past 5 years. So we don't see a lot of it. And 3 of those 7 violations were with land developers, who I would assume are a little bit different than this gentleman in terms of understanding where a right-of-way is and isn't. I think that we can do a better job in terms of publication. I think that there needs to be more available in Jeff's office. I think the town's website also needs to provide the documentation as well. But the biggest problem is, as the gentleman indicates, is that a lot of people think that they own to the edge of the pavement, and other people think that if their right-of-way is 40 feet, that everybody's right-of-way is 40 feet. And it just changes depending on whoever the commissioner of highways were in the 1800s or the 1900s as to what they were accepting for a public road. All of that came through the council, but for the most part, it was based on whatever delineation was provided, and sometimes it was quite narrow.
okay.
If you talk with John, we can send somebody out, take a look at it, and hopefully you don't have an issue.
Okay.
I think one other point that the gentleman made was the 2,500 seems like a gotcha amount, but this is actually a lessening.
What our projected price is right now as far as a replacement tree would be $600. Correct me if I'm wrong, John. Within the policy itself, it depends on the size of the tree, so I'm not sure what size tree you...
I read the old ordinance. I see it's pretty scary. Those 2.5 to 6 inch diameter trees are expensive to have put in.
Yes.
May I ask another question? You seem to be the guy with all the answers.
I don't have the answers on all of them.
Well, you
no.
talk pretty good anyway. What are the overall characteristics of this right-of-way? I have a right-of-way on my property or one of my neighbors does, and it's a right-of-way so he can access his property. He drives over my land. It's a right-of-way, and it's all cool. But he can't tell me what to do on my property. It's my understanding that if you need an easement in order to tell. Is that right? I'm not a lawyer. I only play one in town council meetings.
But if someone has access over your property, it's not a public right-of-way, it's an easement. your property is burdened by an easement, so that someone else can get to their property.
Huh. Are you a lawyer?
That wouldn't be affected.
Okay. So a right-of-way, the fact that you have a right-of-way gives the town the authority to tell me not to cut a tree? A public right-of-way. Where is public right-of-way defined? It's not defined in the tree ordinance.
Right away is basically the streets and roads throughout the town.
Where is it defined? Where can I read up what it is? I want to understand so I don't step in this bear trap again.
I think the easiest way to describe it is that you would have to take a look at the plat for wherever your property is located. And if you looked at that plat, it would show what was accepted by the town as the public right-of-way. It would show the meets and bounds description of both the width, the length, and how it went, how
It's in the deed?
Every single town right-of-way has been accepted by the town council into the town's highway system. For them to be accepted into the town highway system, there has to be a physical description of the property that's being dedicated for a public purpose. So, if you're on Avenue A, you would be able to determine where that plat was of Avenue A and be able to see exactly what the dimensions of the right-of-way were. You're also going to have to be able to define where the corner boundaries are for your property. So how your property fits into that map that shows the right-of-way, you're going to have to look at that.
So I have to understand this. If the boundaries of my property are defined here, then the town does not have a right-of-way on my property. Because you said that if the surveyor's map shows that those trees are on my property, then I can cut them down. You said that.
That's correct.
So that means you don't have a right-of-way there. Is that correct?
Correct. The survey shows that your private property. This ordinance only applies to public property.
Oh, okay.
It does not apply to private property.
Oh.
You can do whatever you want on private property.
Well, I want to take care of it, is what I want to do. I want a beautiful...
I think you're best off talking to John Schock. I think he can
Okay.
help you a lot more than,
All right.
as far as the description.
Okay, next quick question. Where is the tree replacement policy? I can't find that.
The tree replacement policy, it will be posted online. I can give you a copy of it tonight.
It's not part of the tree ordinance?
It's not part of the ordinance. It's referenced in the ordinance.
Is it part of town ordinances?
No, it provides a guidance to the ordinance itself. The ordinance...
Oh, it's a reference document of some sort? Okay. Okay, I've taken up enough time. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
I'll have him give you a copy before you leave.
Hi, Karina Burston again from Wakefield. I just wanted to make a couple comments as a member of the general public. I think the elimination of the requirement of a systemized tree management program is unwise and probably not the best use of resources. I think it would be far more useful to have that systemized method of tree management. Right now, I live in Wakefield, and I see all of the dead trees around and the trees that haven't been taken care of, and it would lead me to believe that we don't have a tree board or a tree warden. I think it's really important for the town to see that it's being taken care of by these people, and I think to the extent that the Conservation Commission wants to contribute to that effort, I would encourage that. I don't understand why that would be a bad thing. I do know that we in our town have the University of Rhode Island, which is an agricultural school, and I know that they do tree work. I think there are a lot of resources to help the town if it doesn't have the economic ability to do this, and I would encourage the town to consider tapping into those resources. But I think it's a really, I think it's much more important than it appears that the town considers it. And I think that the quality of life for the residents of Wakefield would be much enhanced by a better tree management system. And the second comment that I have is in terms of the restitution, I think that I don't understand why putting a maximum amount on a tree is going to help get more money or be able to collect these fines any better. If somebody isn't able to pay $3,000, I don't know what the difference is between that and $2,500. I think a better system would be to punish the people who can pay for it and have some kind of system of or method of lowering fines on those who are unable to pay. And the reason that I say that is that if a developer goes through and cuts down 6 trees on a right-of-way, knowing perfectly well what they're doing, and they're beautiful trees, and the developer should be able to pay for the full amount of the tree, knowing that he's doing that. Whereas somebody who is just taking down a tree that they might feel is in danger or is in diseased and doesn't know about calling John Shock, should maybe not be punished as heavily. So that's just my 2 cents. I think this can be revised to make it more equitable.
I just did want to comment. I think that our objective isn't to collect fees. Our objective is to collect the fees necessary to replace the trees that are removed. So I think what you're saying and what we're saying are the same thing. We're not looking to generate money for the town. We're looking to ensure that if a 30-inch tree is removed, that 4 trees are going to replace that one tree. If that costs us, $2,500 to replace those 4 trees, that's all we're looking. We're not looking to do anything other than that.
And I guess, and I would say that I'm actually saying the opposite. I'm saying that if a developer wants to take down a 24-inch tree, that they should be willing to pay for it, and there should be a punitive.
If we saw the egregious act, if it was somebody who just said, I don't care, we're taking them down, we have the ability to go after them for up to $2,500. But the person who may not understand that they were on the right-of-way and did take it down, if in fact it was a 30-inch tree, they're going to have to pay the $600 times the 4 trees to replace that. But we could go after the developer that had a blatant disregard for the public right-of-way and took those trees out, and go after them for more than just what the policy would allow us for. In the case of it being a violation where somebody really didn't know that they were violating the town ordinance. A couple of these places, that's exactly what we have, is people that took down trees and thought they were on their property. In other cases, we've had people that thought it was easier to remove the trees and not go through the process, and we'll pay it because time's money. Those we can go after up to $2,500.
So I would say why remove a maximum that may be more than $2,500 when you could have an appeals process by which somebody who couldn't pay the money to remove a tree unknowingly could do. I think in reviewing what we see in other municipalities and what a court would direct at the $2,500 is a reasonable expectation. If we were looking for what we had in the past, it was excessive. Okay.
Any further comments from the public?
Make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
So moved. Any further comment from the council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously. Do I hear a motion?
In regard to item 7B, I make a motion that the town council hereby approves public hearing item 7B, amending chapter 18.5 of the town code tree ordinance as detailed in agenda exhibit 1. Further, the town council authorizes the use of these amendments to address any outstanding tree ordinance violations in place at the time of its passage.
Second. All right, any further discussion on this item? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Item 8, communications. 8B is a communication dated May 10th, 2016 from Joanne Riccitelli, Land Protection Director, South Kingstown Land Trust, providing additional information on their recent request for town council endorsement of the governor's proposed $35 million green economy bond. Joanne.
Thanks. And I actually today got another update as the effort to find support for this statewide bond for open space protection as well as bike paths and other things. The letter from a week and a half ago, I think, said 12 communities. Now we're at 17, and one isn't even on this new handout. So this is a statewide effort to, in part, the part that we're particularly interested in is the $4 million that would help to support local open space projects, which means that a group like ours could apply for some of that money. This particular grant fund, a local open space bond through DEM, has been in place since 1985. We've used it on numerous occasions, and it's one of the sources of money that we go to first before we come to ask for money from you. So we are interested in seeing that money be replenished into that fund, because now we're at the end of that, the funding that was from the previous bond. But not only is the $4 million is money that we could apply for projects that come to our organization, but because we have the Great Swamp Management Area and then the South Shore Management Area, other DEM properties in town, if there's property near those that DEM is interested in buying, then there's another $4 million for the state acquisition program also in this bond. So there's really $8 million worth of relevant money directly for open space in this particular bond. And then there's other good stuff in there as well. So I do have this this flyer that's been put together recently, which is already out of date because there's another. I can leave it for you.
Just one of them, maybe give it to Dale.
Since that was published, I think a few days ago, the town of Jamestown has also passed a resolution to support the bond. Any questions on that? Obviously, it would help a lot for, our neighboring towns, Charlestown and Richmond, have already passed resolutions in support. Jamestown just did. It's more money that we can apply for to help protect land in our town.
Joanne, are you concerned, or has anything given any indication the governor won't support this?
Oh, the governor will. The governor's proposing it. It's getting it through the legislature is the only questionable piece in the process, because the state's population has overwhelmingly supported these bonds.
Right.
It's just a question of whether the legislature feels that it's too big, the right things, whatever.
I didn't know if you had any specific concerns that you heard in opposition to something like this.
No, I haven't, but I'm not sure that I would. I tend to hear from the people who support it, so I don't know if there's an effort to derail it, but I think that perhaps that's why people are working so hard to get towns and organizations to support it is that, they want to show that there really is a lot of support out there. And in one of the, I think the first letter I sent showed the town by town approval ratings. Statewide it's been near 70%, 65 to 70% in each of these past 5 elections. In South Kingstown it's been over that. So these open space bonds are always well supported by the voters because they really like their parks and open spaces.
To that point, Liz, I think one of the things that advocates are concerned about is the last time there was a green bond like this, the agricultural or the open space monies were removed sort of at the last minute by the House Finance Committee. So this by the House Finance Committee. So, the governor has proposed making this part of the budget. Now it's up to the House Finance. Theoretically, us sending a resolution to the House will make them more likely to keep it in its current form. All right. Any other questions for Jan?
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion?
Excuse me, we did not talk about this really at the work session, but I do make a motion to approve item 8B.
We actually have to, second, but do we have to specify what we're going to do, right? It's not just an approval.
The motion is to support having the bond issue be placed. And presumably Dale would then allow our legislators to know that you've endorsed it.
Okay.
So moved. Any further discussion? All right. Well, I think we didn't talk about it, but there's also a portion of this green bond that would go to bike paths, which I think are a great thing, great asset to our own community. Hopefully we could get the bike path finished to Narragansett Beach. And we're seeing support from a number of local organizations, including Healthy Places by Design. So I think, again, I'm a big supporter of the green bond. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. And that motion carries unanimously. Let's see here. That brings us to 8D, resolutions adopted May 10th, 2016 by the South Kingstown School Committee in support of Senate Bill 2016. S-2648 is an act relating to education, teacher tenure, relative to notice and hearing requirements for teacher termination for just cause. And in support of Senate Bill 2016 S-2735, an act relating to education by literacy seal. That would establish a state seal of biliteracy to recognize high school graduates who have attained proficiency in one or more languages in addition to English. These have been received. What are we going to do with them?
Make a motion that we, per our discussion in the work session, place these 2 items on file.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion?
Well, I would just like to add, if I don't know if we have to change the motion, but I would like to add that we get a little more information, because we actually really haven't seen too much in these resolutions.
Yeah, I was going to get copies of them, and I'll forward them to the manager's office, and then they'll be distributed to you.
Well,
Thank you.
It's not something that I say I would not support, but I agree that it should be placed on file, because we have not actually done anything.
You can always place it on an agenda, an upcoming agenda, if you desire.
In particular, the first one there about teacher tenure looked like it might be a good resolution, but we don't. Okay. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously. And that brings us to number 9 on the agenda, comments from interested citizens. This is public's opportunity to come up and speak your mind. Just state your name for the record and go for it.
Byron Cahoon, 311 North Road in Peacedale. I represent the Light the Dog Park Committee, the South Kingstown Dog Park Association, which I've been happy to chair a committee to raise money to put solar-powered lights at the dog park. I'm pleased to report to the Town Council we've had success in our fundraising activities. We had a pasta supper at the Elks on May 11th, and we were able to make $5,622 that night towards lighting the dog park. And right now, from our last account, we have in the bank $18,000 to put lights in the dog park. I think that we had a heck of a committee that worked on it. I got to give a lot of thanks to Terry Murphy for her work. She did a great job helping us out, and people were very interested and they really liked the park. I went over there yesterday afternoon and I counted 32 people with big dogs and small dogs using the dog park. So it is a very popular item in South Kingstown.
Byron, I'd just like to give you and your group hats off. You saw what some would say was a want, others would say is a need, and you found a way to fund it without asking the taxpayers. So I thank you for that.
Very impressive.
And to echo what Joe said, you're really setting the example. That's what we love to see from any initiative that people have. You know, we're going to find a way to make it happen and be part of the solution. And Joe, I think we were all made some appearance there in some capacity, and you did amazing work. So
thank you very
for
much,
everything
Liz.
you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just want to maybe go forward with the bid process and get the lights installed so we can have them for the fall and people can have time to get their dogs, get home from work and get their dogs to the dog park to enjoy the park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Murray Gates, Murray Gates from Kingston. I apologize on behalf of my dog for her atrocious behavior at the dog park. Very unruly. But I wanted to come tonight more with an inquiry than anything else. Over the past 2 years, I think it's been, I've had an appreciation that's grown over the tool of the comprehensive plan. Great tool. I think the state of Rhode Island really hasn't, including the people within each municipality, haven't really understood the value of that tool yet, and people are just really getting to understand how it can and should be used as a planning tool. With that said, I had heard, and I can't remember if it was through conversation or the newspaper, that there might be an effort underway to do a revision of the comprehensive plan. So my question was really, what is that effort, and what is the process for getting the public and included in that process?
I think the comprehensive plan that's in place now has just been submitted to the state for final approvals. Right now, the planning board has worked on village studies, and they've completed the village studies with West Kingston as well as Matunic. Then why don't you come up and address it in whole? But we're not looking for a wholesale change on the comprehensive plan.
We're beginning the process for an update of the plan in accordance with the state law that's changed. There now is a 10-year approval time frame going forward, and we actually had an RFP out in the street that we developed working with statewide planning program in accordance with the state has adopted new standards and guidelines for comprehensive plans that are more specific and to some degree more stringent than in the past, but it's still within the context of the enabling statute. We received some responses to the RFP, and the pricing was very high that we went through that process. So now we made some revisions working with both the planning board to the request for proposals, and we're asking the bidders, so-called, to rebid on the document, and that will be, the planning board will be the driving entity in terms of crafting that, and there will be public workshops and hearings going along as that process unfolds. But the revised proposal submittals we're looking for, I believe, on June the 10th. But the initial, you know, and there's quite a number of communities going through the same process now. But, you know, our plan is still in place at this point, and there's a state law pending that would kick out the compliance date for the comp plan update out to, I think, June 30th of 2017. So that's where it stands.
Thanks. Murray Gates, just a quick follow-up. Does that, within the timeline, do we have a feel as to when the public starts to get engaged, or is that too far to schedule out?
We do have in the RFP some requirements for, you know, you need public engagement to do a proper job with the planning, and we will certainly make a good faith effort in that regard, working with the planning board. We haven't hired the consulting entity yet, so I think that the schedule will be defined, you know, through the contractual arrangement that and I'm hoping that our pricing is, you know, something we can, you know, be palatable from a financial perspective. So, you know, that will all unfold coming weeks and days.
Do you want to address the new elements that are going to be required?
Yeah, there's a couple of new elements that are required under the revised guidelines and changes to state law on natural hazards planning, which would address things like sea level rise and climate change. Energy planning is a requirement, and there's additional changes to the economic development element to include more consideration of agricultural uses, which is important to South Kingstown, obviously, and
I think the point that I want to ensure is that we are up to date with our comp.
We are now, yeah.
And what we're looking at is the short-term horizon to get a consultant, but as far as the public participation, that will be a component of the new element developments that are required as far as reviews on existing. But I think the base document is not going to change substantially unless there's some public purpose that would be served by that change.
Yeah. No, we think, you know, it's a pretty good document. It's been a great deal of effort over the years to put it together, and we're looking for an update rather than not a wholesale rewrite, because I think, you know, there's a lot of good policy directions and solid, you know.
One of the few communities that really has.
Right. Yeah, there's quite a number of communities now that are out of sync with the state law requirements for update. You know, we have an approved plan in place now, but there's, you know, a number of our sister communities do not at the present time.
Thanks. Any other comments from the public? Comments from council members?
I just wanted to thank everyone that came out this past Saturday for the VFW Steak Fry at the Elks Lodge. It was sponsored by the Narragansett Lions Club as well as the Elks Lodge here in South Kingstown, and it was a wonderful event, amazing turnout. Certainly, I think we counted over 175 people were there, so it was a wonderful event. And on that note, if you didn't have a chance to get there for that, there will be a Memorial Day breakfast at Camden's between 7 and 10 right before the parade, which I know the parade committee has been working very hard for that event this year. So the parade starts at 10 a.m. this Memorial Day, so certainly hope you can all be there.
Any other? No. All right. Steve, town manager's report.
I can't top anything, Bryant. Whatever he said, I'm with.
Very good. Mike?
Unless there are questions, I have nothing in particular.
All right, that brings us to item 12 on the agenda, appointments.
Make a resolution to appoint James King to the Zoning Board of Review, alternate number 2, for a term to expire in March of 2017.
I second that.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. And it brings us to 13D in new business. A resolution authorizing an award of bid to Republic Services of Fall River, Massachusetts for the regular refuse disposal and recycling package at the unit cost per pickup bid for the period July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2018, further detailed in a memo from the Public Services Director to the Town Manager dated May 12th.
To save you a couple of minutes, item D, E, and F can be considered as a single item. We go out to bid for 3 different services. In this case, all services, lowest qualified bidder was Republic Services out of Fall River. The prices are considerably higher than what the prior 2-year contract had been. We had budgeted in 16-17 for about a 15% increase because we assumed the increase based on the loss of the existing vendor. The increase is probably about $4,000 to $5,000 over what our budgeted amounts are. The individual departments, because this is spread over about 8 different accounts, will be responsible for adjusting budgets to be able to reflect the changes. The grit, which is item E, and the sludge transportation, obviously, is paid for out of the wastewater fund, and those are shared both by the university and the town of Narragansett. The refuge collection, item D, is simply all of the municipal buildings that have trash collection. The biggest expense that we're seeing the increase on is in recycling, and that's going up from $2,800 up to about $10,400 for the 2-year period. We're awarding on a 2-year basis, but again, only half of the amounts listed on the agenda this evening are resident to the 16-17 budget. I recommend council approve items D, E, and F as presented this evening.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve items 13D, E, and F, regular refuse disposal and recycling, sludge transportation, and the grid package.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries unanimously. And that brings us to the end of our agenda tonight.
I'll make a motion to close.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. It is late.